Welcome to today's webinar on the vector-borne disease module produced by the Minnesota Department of Health. I'm Micaela Resh, a health educator and communication specialist with the Climate and Health Program at the Minnesota Department of Health. The Minnesota Climate and Health Program is part of a nationwide effort to anticipate, prepare for, and respond to the health impacts of climate change. The program follows 5 overarching goals that guide its work: educate and increase awareness of the health impacts of climate change, research and improve data for research to ensure that our work is based on the best science available, design and evaluate adaptation interventions, develop tools and products for public health practitioners and others to use to prepare for climate change, and provide technical assistance to communities for mapping vulnerable populations and planning for climate changes. This training module is one of 7 training modules that address the health effects of climate changes in Minnesota. The other 6 training modules cover the topics of Climate and Health 101, extreme heat events, agriculture and food security, air quality, well-being, and water quality and quantity. These modules have been designed for public health professionals as well as others concerned about climate change to provide a basic level of information about the observed climate changes in Minnesota and their health impacts. Each module is a set of slides scripted with slide notes so you can present them to your own audiences. These training modules are funded in part by a grant for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Following each webinar, we will post the training module on the Minnesota Department of Health website so anyone can access it for future use. Today's webinar will be interactive. We will be asking 4 polling questions throughout the session that you can respond to using the polling bar that will appear on the right side of your screen. If you have any questions throughout the session, please submit them using the chat function located in the drop-down on the top of your screen. We will be saving 15 minutes to answer questions at the end. Here is an outline for today's webinar. We will be covering an overview of vector-borne disease, climate changes in Minnesota, ecology and epidemiology of vector-borne disease in Minnesota, changes in vector-borne disease risk, and meaningful action steps to protect yourself from vector-borne diseases. I would now like to introduce our presenter for today's webinar, Molly Peterson. Molly is a vector-borne disease epidemiologist at the Minnesota Department of Health. She earned her Master of Public Health degree from Cleveland State University and also has a background in veterinary services and community-based participatory research. As an epidemiologist, her work involves human disease surveillance as well as field and research studies on topics such as vector distribution, infection prevalence, and vector-borne disease impacts. Welcome, Molly.
Thank you, Micaela, for the introduction, and thank you to those who are joining us for today's webinar. I'm super happy to be here to discuss vector-borne diseases of Minnesota and the potential impacts that climate change may have on future disease risk. I'd first like to start off by covering a few vector-borne disease terms that will certainly come up in today's module. The first is disease agent, and this refers to disease-causing bacteria, viruses, parasites such as protozoa. A vector refers to arthropods that transmit disease agents. A host is an animal or human fed on by a vector, and a reservoir is the source from which a vector acquires disease agents while feeding. What are vector-borne diseases? Vector-borne diseases are caused by disease agents that are transmitted by arthropod vectors, and these diseases naturally cycle back and forth between arthropod vectors and their animal reservoir hosts, which tend to be typically mammals and birds. This cycle maintains the disease agents, again, those bacteria, those viruses, or protozoa, in the environment. Humans can acquire these vector-borne diseases when they are incidentally bitten by arthropod vectors. So, for example, the graphic that I have on the right side of the screen shows the life cycle of a tick, which I'll further explain on in this webinar. Ticks feed on multiple hosts with a blood meal at each stage of their life cycle, and they typically feed on birds and small mammals, but may feed on humans that they come into contact with incidentally. In this case, the disease agents are maintained in nature through natural reservoir hosts and the ticks that are feeding on them. Overall, vector-borne diseases are dynamic and complex topics as they combine elements of human health, animal health and biology, and our shared environment. The complex nature of these diseases certainly makes prevention and control of them complex as well. It also makes predicting future risk a challenge because even in small areas, vector-borne disease risk is not evenly distributed. Both vectors and their hosts are constantly evolving, so knowledge of vector biology is critical to our understanding and preventing of these diseases. These diseases are dependent on a large number of factors that may relate directly or indirectly to the disease agent, the arthropod vector, the reservoir host, or the human host. And climate change in the environment may affect any or all of these factors, as the vectors and their hosts are sensitive and responsive to environmental conditions. The impact that climate and the environment has on vectors and their hosts in turn has an impact on disease transmission and risk by affecting things such as the abundance of vectors and reservoir hosts, the numbers of infected vectors with a certain disease agent, the abundance or presence of suitable habitat, and human behaviors that can lead to those incidental exposures to infected vectors. I have not been changing. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. This next section will provide a basic overview of the climate changes occurring in Minnesota, and I will pass it back to Micaela.
Before we get started with the observed climate changes in Minnesota, let's cover a few definitions. Although related, the terms weather and climate are definitely different. Weather generally refers to the conditions of the Earth's atmosphere over a short period of time, like days or weeks, while climate refers to the conditions of the atmosphere over long periods of time, like 20 to 30 years. So when we talk about climate change, we're referring to any significant change in the measures of climate lasting for an extended period of several decades. Weather has always fascinated Minnesotans, perhaps because we have all kinds of it, but recently climate change has also become a leading topic of concern. And here are the definitions for climate adaptation and climate mitigation. Actions to prevent the negative health effects of climate change can be described as one or the other. For climate adaptation, this means to anticipate and prepare for the effects of climate change in order to reduce the associated health burdens. Climate mitigation refers to efforts that slow, stabilize, or reverse climate change by reducing greenhouse gas emissions. The Minnesota Department of Health is dedicated to understanding the links between climate changes and negative health impacts and identifying strategies for addressing these health impacts in Minnesota communities. Most climate scientists attribute our changing climate to the burning of fossil fuels like coal and oil to produce energy for everyday use. This burning adds heat-trapping gases into the air like carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. These heat-trapping gases are commonly known as greenhouse gases. As this graphic shows, the rise in greenhouse gases is leading to increases in temperature and changes in precipitation. These changes are disrupting our air quality, weather patterns, water quality and quantity, and ecosystems, which in turn are leading to more air pollution, extreme heat, floods and drought, and ecosystem threats. Many of these changes have impacts on the health of people, and these impacts will likely increase. One of the main effects of Minnesota's changing climate is that temperatures are rising. Minnesota has gotten noticeably warmer, especially over the last few decades. This slide shows a shift in the rate of change of Minnesota's annual average temperatures. The time frame is from 1895 to 2016, which is approximately the last 120 years. The left side of the graph shows Minnesota temperatures for roughly the first 60 years from 1895 to 1959, where temperatures increased by about 0.2 degrees Fahrenheit per decade. The graph on the right side of the slide shows roughly the next 60 years from 1960 to 2016, where Minnesota's average temperature has accelerated to a rate of over 0.5 degree Fahrenheit per decade. That would amount to an increase of 5 degrees Fahrenheit that we would experience by the end of this century, a significant accelerated rate. These maps show temperature changes since the beginning of the record for different parts of the state and for annual average, winter low, and summer high temperatures. As seen on the previous slide, annual average temperatures are increasing. However, winter low temperatures are rising much faster than the average annual temperatures. In fact, much of the observed warming we are experiencing in Minnesota can be explained by the warming of our winter low temperatures. In general, we are now having warmer winters, less snow, and more winter rains. Summer high temperatures has risen slightly in the north, but have fallen in the middle and southern part of the state. And finally, the northern part of the state is warming faster than the southern part of the state. This is consistent with patterns seen across the northern hemisphere, where climate changes are occurring more rapidly at higher latitudes. Rising temperatures are already causing substantial shifts in the environment. Maps of the plant hardiness zones from the U.S. Department of Agriculture show what types of plants will survive well and where. Zones are based on the average annual minimum winter temperature over a 30-year period, and each zone represents a 10-degree Fahrenheit increment of minimum temperatures. The maps on this slide compare 2 points in recent times. The map on the left is from 1990, and the map on the right is from 2015. Look closely at the changes in Minnesota over this 25-year period. In 1990, Minnesota was predominantly Zone 3 in the northern half of the state and Zone 4 in the southern half of the state. By 2015, these zones shifted north substantially, and in fact, zones historically associated with areas like southern Iowa have now arrived in southern Minnesota. Minnesota is now predominantly Zone 4 across the majority of the state, and Zone 5 has now emerged in the far southern part of the state. The other change that we are observing in Minnesota is a change in our precipitation patterns. With warmer temperatures, more evaporation occurs, and warmer air can hold more water vapor than cooler air. This slide shows Minnesota's average annual precipitation. The time frame is the same as the temperature slide, showing the past 120 years from 1895 to 2016. The graph on the left highlights the trend from 1895 to 1959, and the graph on the right highlights the trend from 1960 to 2016. For the first 60 years, the trend in precipitation was actually slightly downward, at a loss of 0.2 of an inch per decade. This downward trend was influenced by the Dust Bowl years of the 1930s. The rate of precipitation in the recent 60 years, however, has increased by nearly 0.5 of an inch per decade. Along with the increase in annual average precipitation, the character of precipitation is changing in Minnesota. The overall increase in our average annual precipitation is being driven by heavy rain events. The graphic on this slide points out that there have been 15 historic mega rain events in Minnesota since 1858, which is when weather record keeping began about 160 years ago. A mega rain event represents a huge amount of rain over a very large geographic area. This is categorized by 6 inches of rainfall covering more than 1,000 square miles, with the core of the rainfall being at least 8 inches. To help visualize the size of this large geographic area, 1,000 square miles is the combined size of all of Hennepin, Ramsey, and Washington counties in east central Minnesota. Over this 160-year period, 7 of these 15 mega rain events have occurred since 2002, just in the last 15 years. And for the first time, we had 2 mega rain events in the same year, one in July 2016 and one in August 2016. Even though there is more moisture in the atmosphere, that doesn't necessarily mean a consistent rise in rain and snow. The changing character of precipitation in Minnesota brings the potential for both extreme wet and extreme dry spells. Increases in heavy rain events have the potential to cause both increased flooding and drought. Based on the localized nature of heavy rain events and their intensity, this can leave some areas of the state drenched and other areas without any precipitation. An example was the year 2012. In that year, 75 of Minnesota's 87 counties were declared disaster areas for drought, shown as the brown shaded counties on this map. In the same year, 15 counties were declared disaster areas for flooding. These are the blue shaded counties on the map. For those 15 counties that were declared disasters for flooding, 8 were also declared disasters for drought within the same year. These are the light blue crosshatch counties on the map. This underscores the intensification of precipitation extremes in both directions. In this next section, Molly will cover the ecology and epidemiology of vector-borne disease in Minnesota.
So before I begin talking about vector distribution and habitat, it's important to first understand Minnesota's unique geography. Minnesota is truly an east meets west state that manifests in a convergence of several biomes and different habitats. And these habitats have an impact on where vectors live and thrive, and in which turn has an impact on disease risk. Beginning in the northeast corner of the state, where many of us Minnesotans travel to enjoy the North Country, we see mixed coniferous forests. These are forests comprised of many deciduous trees such as oak, maple, or basswood trees, with some cone-bearing evergreens in many areas like spruce, fir, or tamarack. In the southeast corner of the state, kind of cutting up through the metro and into the north-central part of the state, we see a dominant deciduous forest. And these forests are made up of trees that lose their leaves at the end of the growing season, like sugar, maple, oak trees, with sapling layers and herb layers mixed in as well. In the southwest corner and the western border of our state, expansive grassland that previously existed has almost entirely been developed for agricultural purposes. And finally, in the upper northwest corner lies Minnesota's smallest biome, tallgrass aspen parkland. This biome is home to prairie grasses and wetlands with groves of aspen trees and is affected by harsh winds and dry conditions that also affect its inhabitants.
Before we begin talking about ticks, we will take a break for our first polling question. Which of the following tick species poses the greatest threat to public health in Minnesota? A, black-legged deer tick, B, American dog wood tick, or C, the Lone Star tick? You will now have 30 seconds to submit your answer. You'll have a few more seconds to respond. Thank you for answering. The correct answer is A, black-legged tick. Let's learn more about the ticks of public health concern in Minnesota.
So in Minnesota, there are roughly 12 species of hard ticks found. And these are ticks that have a hard dorsal plate and mouth parts that are visible from above. However, not all of these ticks spread disease, and actually only a few of them are a primary public health concern here in Minnesota. The black-legged tick, which many of you guessed, which is formerly called the deer tick, the American dog tick, commonly known as the wood tick, and the Lone Star tick. The map to the left of each tick here illustrates the geographic distribution of each tick throughout the U.S., and these maps are based on reports of and systematic searches for each tick species. So they're really approximate ranges and still being currently updated with their ranges as they expand. Notice the Lone Star tick just reaches the southern border of Iowa. This tick is rarely found in Minnesota. However, we do receive sporadic reports here at the health department and even submissions of this tick, which were collected in Minnesota. Given the increasing number of reports, it's likely that its range has expanded to southern Minnesota from southern Iowa. The American dog tick, which is commonly referred to as the wood tick, is widely abundant throughout our state, and people often come into contact with it, although it rarely transmits disease, though still possible. So I will specifically be focusing on the black-legged tick today, as it's responsible for transmitting all 5 of Minnesota's endemic tick-borne diseases, making it our main public health concern here in Minnesota, tick-wise. The diseases it can transmit include Lyme disease, anaplasmosis, and babesiosis, which are our 3 most commonly reported tick-borne diseases in Minnesota. There's also several other emerging tick-borne diseases, such as Powassan virus and ehrlichiosis, as well as others that may or may not be spread by the black-legged tick. If you note the approximate distribution of the black-legged tick throughout Minnesota, you'll see it's not as widespread as the American dog tick, but its range has expanded greatly in the past 15 years or so, which I will discuss later on in the webinar. Again, because the black-legged tick is our primary public health concern tick in Minnesota, the following slides on ticks will be specifically referring to the black-legged tick. So understanding Minnesota's unique biome, as we saw in the previous biome map, allows us to understand where we're likely to come into contact with black-legged ticks. This picture shows a great example of black-legged tick habitat. While we may find American dog ticks, commonly again wood ticks, that are found in open grassy areas and woods, black-legged ticks are much more sensitive creatures that are pretty prone to desiccation, which means drying out. So they need ideal conditions to prevent this from happening. In this picture, you can take note of the canopy cover, the understory and herb layer with lots of brush and leaf litter on the forest floor. These are ideal conditions that provide an ideal home for the black-legged tick and its animal host, because the habitat is really warm and moist and creates this humid environment where the tick will do well. Black-legged ticks spend most of their lifetime on the forest floor, conserving energy under the leaf litter and herb layer, and they only come out when they're trying to find a host. And since most people are not walking through this thick of the wooded areas we look at in this picture, exposure to black-legged ticks is probably greatest along the trails, which you can see in the bottom left corner, in the fringe area between woods and borders of yards, parks, or other open areas where people may be. Black-legged ticks may rarely be found in these open areas that are, as long as they're near like a wooded habitat, so it's important to be on the lookout for ticks when in or near wooded areas. Hard ticks have 4 life stages: the egg, which isn't pictured on this slide, larva, nymph, and adult. All ticks take a blood meal at the larval and nymph stages, but only females will take a blood meal at the adult stage. Adult males will attach to hosts the way that female adults do, but they do not take a blood meal, meaning they are much less likely to spread disease and therefore less of a public health concern. So how long would the typical lifespan of a black-legged tick be thought to be? You might be surprised to learn that they can live anywhere from 2 to 3 years, depending on their success at finding hosts, mates, and other things like environmental factors such as temperature. Most of their life is spent in their environment instead of on a host because they do only take up to 3 blood meals. The life cycle begins when an adult female tick lays hundreds to a few thousands of eggs in the springtime, which go on to hatch into larvae that summer. The larvae will take their first blood meal, and at this point, because they're small, they prefer to feed on smaller mammals like mice or birds. So they do not usually at this point feed on humans. It's after this feeding that the larvae molt into nymphs and then will rest until the following spring. During their first meal, the larvae may pick up a disease agent. For example, Borrelia burgdorferi is the agent that causes Lyme disease, while they're feeding on a small mammal such as the white-footed mouse. Not all larvae will pick up a disease agent during their feeding, but may have a second opportunity to do this during the nymph stage. In the late spring and summer of the second year, nymphs will go on to take that second blood meal, and hosts at this point can range from small to large. Those who do take a blood meal will molt into an adult male or female tick that fall. And at this point, adult ticks really prefer to feed mainly on larger mammals like deer or us humans. Adult females will feed on a host, mate with an adult male tick, lay anywhere, again, from hundreds to a few thousands of eggs, and then die. The males will attach to a host in order to find a female mate and then also die. Some adults who do not find a host and mate may survive throughout the winter and will have a second chance of doing this the following spring. And keep in mind, black-legged ticks can usually survive Minnesota winters as long as we have good snow cover.
We will now be having our next polling question. When looking for a host, black-legged ticks do which of the following? C, jump, climb on near ground level, or fall from trees? You will now have 30 seconds to submit your answer. You'll have a few more seconds to submit your answer. Thank you for answering. The correct answer is C, climb on near ground level. Let's learn more about the tick questing process.
When ticks are looking for a host, they perform a behavior called questing. And this is when they emerge from the leaf litter, again under ideal conditions, and they will crawl to the tips of grass, leaves, branches, brush, and they use their back 2 sets of legs to hold on to the tip of the vegetation they're on, and then reach their 2 front sets of legs out to grab onto a host that's going to brush or pass by. And you can see this in the photo on the slide. From there, they do not jump, but crawl. Some ticks will attach by biting a host relatively quickly, while others will crawl around for a while, finding areas such as the ears or the base of the scalp. Because many people find ticks along their scalp or higher up on their body, it's very commonly thought that they jump, fly, or fall from trees, but ticks do not do any of these behaviors. They have just crawled up there without us noticing. Again, they're very prone to desiccation and drying out, so they tend to stay near the forest floor. Questing behavior is very dependent on weather and environmental conditions for these reasons, as they require the humidity to climb out of the leaf litter and quest. And without these conditions, they'll just stay on the leaf litter on the forest floor in order to conserve the moisture that they have. Good questing conditions can change throughout the span of a day as temperature and humidity levels change, and things like increased wind can also affect questing as it can contribute to drier conditions for them. Although they can have many different hosts, the two main hosts for the black-legged tick is the white-footed mouse and the white-tailed deer. The white-footed mouse is the main reservoir host for the black-legged tick. Immature stages such as larvae and nymphs can become infected while feeding on these mice that may be carrying disease agents that cause Lyme disease or other tick-borne diseases. If the mouse is infected with the right bacteria or disease agent that causes one of the tick-borne diseases, the larvae that feeds on it will become infected and transmit the bacteria during its next feeding. This is only the case when the tick feeds on an infected animal, as not all animals are infected. Deer get a bit of a bad rap when it comes to ticks, as people often associate the two. Deer can support large numbers of ticks, as they are the main reproductive host for adults that are seeking to mate with other adult ticks. Adult male and female ticks will mate on a deer after a female has taken a blood meal. The female will then fall off, lay eggs, and then die. Deer do not play a role in the disease transmission cycle, and even if a tick were to get infected from a deer, that adult tick will not go on to feed again and pass along the disease, and very rarely pass infections off to their offspring. Deer may serve as a mode of tick distribution, however, carrying ticks to new areas, but the new habitat must still be suitable for the ticks to survive and thrive in this new area. When ticks do attach to a human host, there are a few factors that impact disease transmission at this point. One, ticks must first be infected with a pathogen to transmit the disease to humans. In the case of Lyme disease, approximately 1 in 3 adult ticks and 1 in 5 nymph ticks are infected with bacteria that causes Lyme disease. Second, ticks must be attached for a certain period of time before they are able to transmit disease agents, such as those listed here on the slide. Overall, nymphs and adult female ticks pose the greatest risk for disease transmission to humans, remembering that adult males are less of a public health risk as they will attach to hosts but do not take a blood meal. The 3 diseases listed here are 3 most commonly reported tick-borne diseases in Minnesota, with Lyme disease being the most commonly reported disease. Tick-borne disease risk is not evenly distributed throughout Minnesota, and this map depicts risk of tick-borne disease in our state based on an average incidence of Lyme disease, anaplasmosis, and babesiosis from 2007 to 2015. In Minnesota, tick-borne disease risk is highest in wooded or brushy areas where ticks live and thrive. The areas of highest risk, which are the dark red counties, correspond with where we find wooded habitat in Minnesota, if you think back to that biome map. A limitation of this map is that cases are reported by county of residence and not technically or all the time where someone may have been exposed to a tick. This means that not all areas of risk are reflected by this map, including the Minnesota River Valley region, where Minnesota Department of Health staff, such as me and my colleagues, have confirmed black-legged tick presence as far south as New Ulm in Brown County. Overall trends in reported cases of tick-borne diseases in Minnesota are generally increasing over time, and this can be due to any of several reasons, such as distribution of the black-legged tick into new areas, which can expose new members of the population, human behaviors such as an increase in outdoor recreation behaviors or time spent in new high-risk areas, leading to more exposures, increasing awareness of these diseases, which may lead more patients to consider tick-borne diseases as a cause for their acute illness, and therefore more doctors testing for these diseases, more reporting to the health department, among other factors such as environmental conditions. In Minnesota, vector-borne diseases have a strong seasonal component due to vector activity, which is apparent in annual cases reported to the department. From 1996 to 2015, 70% of all confirmed Lyme disease cases reported to the Minnesota Department of Health had illness onset during the months of June, July, or August. And from 2002 to 2015, 97% of all West Nile virus cases reported to Minnesota Department of Health had illness onset during the months of July, August, or September. Therefore, in early summer, we think ticks and tick-borne disease risk, and in the late summer, we think mosquitoes and mosquito-borne disease risk.
It's now time for our next polling question. Up next, we will be discussing mosquitoes and mosquito-borne disease in Minnesota. How many known species of mosquitoes are present in Minnesota? 11, 51, or 150? You will now have 30 seconds to submit your answer. Thank you for answering. The correct answer is B, 51. Let's learn more about mosquitoes in Minnesota.
Mosquitoes are a type of fly that can act as vectors of human disease, and Minnesota is home to 51 species. The diseases they can transmit are referred to as mosquito-borne diseases or arboviruses. Different species of mosquitoes transmit different disease agents similar to how ticks do. Many disease agents require a reservoir to amplify the virus in order to allow for transmission to humans. Mosquito-borne diseases exist naturally in cycles between mosquitoes and susceptible reservoir hosts, such as mammals and birds. And virus amplification occurs as a result of increased circulation of the virus between an increasing number of mosquito vectors and their reservoir hosts. And these diseases may eventually spill over when humans incidentally enter into these ongoing disease transmission cycles or when amplification cycles occur in close proximity to humans. Weather conditions and climate can impact these amplification periods. In Minnesota, our endemic arboviruses include West Nile virus, La Crosse encephalitis, Jamestown canyon virus, Western equine encephalitis, and Eastern equine encephalitis. All of these diseases can cause mild febrile illness, with some illnesses progressing to encephalitis or brain swelling. The mosquito also has a 4-stage life cycle. After a blood meal, an adult female will lay her eggs directly on or near water or in places that may eventually flood with water, like damp soil or containers. The eggs can survive months of dry conditions, with some surviving for years. Once an egg hatches in the water, a larva will emerge, and as it matures, it will grow larger and undergo 4 molts. The larva will live and feed in the water, coming to the surface to breathe as it eventually develops into a pupa. In the pupal stage, the mosquito rests and tumbles, but no feeding occurs at this life stage. Finally, an adult mosquito will emerge from the pupal case at the water and come to rest on the surface of the water. The body and the wings will dry, and eventually the mosquito will leave the water. The whole process can take anywhere from 1 week to a month and depends on many factors such as water temperature, species characteristics, or conditions like food availability. And climate can have an effect on many parts of this life cycle, such as the temperature of the water where eggs hatch and larvae develop. For example, warm water temperatures can speed up the process of development, leading to quicker emergence of adults from pupal cases. As adults, only females will bite and take a blood meal, while males typically feed on nectar or water. And mosquitoes do have host preferences similar to ticks and do not typically prefer humans. West Nile virus is Minnesota's most commonly reported arbovirus. Symptoms of this disease are most severe in the elderly population, who are therefore considered to be high risk. The virus circulates naturally between the CULEX tarsalis mosquito and birds, allowing for virus amplification. Humans and animals such as horses may incidentally become infected when exposed and serve as dead-end hosts of the infection. Many birds serve as a reservoir for the disease before rapidly dying from the infection, while other birds may become chronically infected as they do not die as often. And these chronically infected birds that migrate may serve as a mode of disease spread to new areas. CULEX tarsalis mosquitoes are found to be widely abundant west of the Mississippi River in Minnesota, as its habitat includes semi-permanent wetlands and drainage ditches, such as those down on agricultural lands. In dry conditions, water in these drainage ditches will stop flowing and become stagnant, which can then be used by mosquitoes as a breeding site. These wetlands produce mosquito populations, but mosquitoes will fly and rest in wooded and brushy areas nearby to conserve moisture. And out in open agricultural land, these areas are often around the homes of farming families or farm buildings, bringing the mosquitoes into areas where their human hosts are. This map depicts risk for West Nile virus based on average incidence from 2002 to 2016. And you can note the higher incidence of disease cases and risk in Minnesota, in western Minnesota, where the CULEX tarsalis mosquito is widely abundant. Every year or every other year, we have a low number of cases that are regularly occurring here in the metro area as well. Lacrosse encephalitis was first reported in the 1960s in a southern Minnesota child. She died in a hospital in Lacrosse, Wisconsin, where the disease was then named after. Spread by the tree hole mosquito, Aedes triseriatus, this primarily affects children. The tree hole mosquito is a forest-dwelling species that does not fly far from where it's bred, only about 200 yards typically, so the risk is often localized. The tree hole mosquito breeds in water-holding habitat in wooded or shaded areas such as man-made containers and tree holes formed naturally in trees or in trees with multiple trunks that form pockets which can hold water. These habitats are often found near areas with reported lacrosse encephalitis. Children under the age of 16 are considered to be high risk for the disease, and residents of wooded or shaded areas in the southern two-thirds of Minnesota are also considered to be high risk. This map shows reported cases of lacrosse encephalitis by county of residence from 1985 to 2016, and you can note that all cases occurred in the southern two-thirds of Minnesota. Jamestown canyon was first reported in the U.S. in 2004. Although widely distributed in North America, Jamestown canyon virus is rarely reported in the U.S. It can be transmitted by any several spring Aedes mosquito species, as well as other mosquito species that commonly bite people. From 2001 to 2013, only 31 cases were reported across the U.S. To date, in 2017, 67 cases of JCV, or Jamestown canyon virus, have been reported in the U.S., with the upper Midwest states reporting the majority of these cases. Aedes species mosquitoes are referred to as snowmelt mosquitoes as they develop in snowmelt pools. They emerge right after the snow melts, which leads to a longer transmission season for these mosquitoes compared to many other mosquito species.
It's now time for our next polling question. Which mosquito-borne disease had the highest number of reported cases in Minnesota from 2002 to 2016? A, West Nile virus, B, lacrosse encephalitis, or C, Jamestown canyon virus? You will now have 30 seconds to submit your answer. Thank you for answering. The correct answer is A, West Nile virus.
Mosquito-borne disease trends appear very different than tick-borne disease trends, and this is likely due to the dependency on weather conditions during the vector activity season, as weather conditions can impact breeding and virus amplification for mosquito-borne diseases. For example, in 2003, Minnesota experienced a hot, dry summer and the largest number of reported West Nile virus cases. Stagnant pools of water, increased water temperature that can lead to quicker mosquito development, and an increased amplification of the virus, all as a result of hot and dry weather conditions, could have possibly led to this increase in cases. Next, I'm going to be talking about changes in vector-borne disease risk. The story of vector-borne disease trends in Minnesota is not unlike that of the rest of the world. It has seen an increase of cases of some diseases and appearance of new diseases, as well as the geographic expansion of some vector distribution over time. The appearance of new disease agents may be due to simply looking harder for them through systematic studies, but may also be due to introductions of new disease agents in the state. Similarly, increased expansion in the range of some vectors may be partially due to the systematic field searches for them in new areas. Environmental conditions play an important role in arthropod vector biology. Vectors are sensitive and responsive to weather factors such as temperature, relative humidity, precipitation, and wind, which can have an impact on their life cycle and host seeking and breeding activities. Their geographic distribution can be impacted by climate, as favorable environmental conditions are critical to a vector's ability to thrive in a specific area. Regarding tick-borne diseases specifically, climate change is likely to impact risk. For example, some scenarios include increased temperature, where it is likely that ticks will become active sooner and stay active longer, allowing for more time to develop and feed on hosts. There may also be a decrease in tick die-off over the winter months as well. An increase in temperature can also lead to new tick species in areas where they weren't before, with the ability to thrive and establish a population, which can also lead to the introduction of new disease agents in these new areas. Increased precipitation and humid conditions may also allow for increased rates of tick survival and extended favorable feeding time each day. An increase in suitable habitat for black-legged ticks and their hosts could lead to an expansion into new areas and allow ticks in these new areas to establish populations easier, with the potential for larger populations. How land is used and developed is also an important consideration when thinking about future risk. For example, homes developed in an area where habitable forest once was may create new exposure opportunities, and deforestation can also lead to a decrease in tick habitat. Tick-borne disease risk is constantly evolving and will continue to do so as vector distribution changes. These distribution maps show the expanding geographic distribution of the black-legged tick from 1996 to 2015 based on counties of recorded presence. Note that some of this expansion is also due to systematic searches for the ticks and documenting new established populations. Expanding tick ranges will also change tick-borne disease risk in new areas. Seen in the previous slide, between 1996 and 2015, black-legged ticks became more established in north and northwest Minnesota, and the risk for tick-borne diseases then followed. These maps show the distribution of Lyme disease cases increasing from 1996 to 2013. Again, cases are recorded by county of residence, but we can note similarities in expansion of disease incidence and vector distribution within Minnesota. Regarding mosquitoes, potential impacts of climate change may include warmer and drier conditions that can lead to increased West Nile virus risk during the mosquito season due to the enhanced virus amplification and greater vector production. Warmer and wetter conditions are favorable for lacrosse encephalitis transmission due to longer virus amplification season and more wet breeding habitat locations, and this could lead to an increase in lacrosse encephalitis risk. Changes in proportion of forest to agriculture land cover may lead to changes in suitable habitat for vectors, their hosts, and the disease agents, leading to changes in human disease risk. Climate change may also lead to an emergence or reemergence of exotic mosquito-borne diseases such as malaria, chikungunya, or Rift Valley fever. Climate change can also increase the survival of exotic mosquito species such as Aedes albopictus, the Asian tiger mosquito, and Aedes japonicus, the Japanese rockpoll mosquito, which is an already surviving and becoming widely established in Minnesota. Next, I'm going to talk about how you can take steps to prevent yourself and your families from contracting vector-borne diseases. The best thing we can do to prevent tick-borne diseases is to practice disease prevention methods. The first is knowing when and where ticks may be living so that you know when and where you may be at risk for exposure to them. The black-legged tick, which spreads the most common tick-borne diseases in Minnesota, prefers wooded and brushy habitat, as we discussed earlier. And although most people tend to stick to trails while in the woods, the fringe areas in the side of the trails can present good exposure opportunities. The American dog tick, commonly again called the wood tick, is commonly found throughout Minnesota and prefers wooded or open grassy areas. Ticks living close to the ground and seeking a host will take advantage of those who brush or walk past them. While in the woods, it's always important to be aware of this and look down often, as you may be able to spot and remove a tick that has recently crawled onto you before it has an opportunity to climb upward. Though you may come across a tick during any warm months of the year, nymphs are most active in Minnesota from mid-May through mid-July, and adult ticks come out when the snow melts in early spring and will stay active through June, when they fade back before coming out again in the fall. The second thing you can do is wear repellent. Wearing repellent is a great prevention measure that people should take in order to prevent tick bites. Repellents that contain 20 to 30% DEET are effective at deterring ticks that may bite them. DEET is safe to apply directly on exposed skin or clothing for children and adults, but should not be used on infants under the age of 2 months. Permethrin products are used directly on clothing and are great for people who spend extended periods of time in possible tick habitat. However, permethrin is not safe to use directly on the skin, but can treat your clothing and gear and will last through multiple washes. You can also buy gear that is already treated with permethrin. Other effective ingredients are available, but use of products registered by the EPA is highly recommended, and you should always be sure to follow the instructions on the label. Showering and washing yourself after coming indoors in order to wash off remaining repellent from your skin is also a good step. Other tips include dressing to keep out the ticks. Wear long-sleeve shirts and long pants. Tuck your pants into your socks to create a barrier and prevent ticks from going up your pant leg. Wearing light-colored clothing can also make it easier to spot ticks that may be on you. Also, after undressing from coming indoors, ticks may be on your clothes and gear, and since we do not want them in your home, it's a good idea to throw clothing in the dryer on high for at least 6 minutes if your clothes are dry, or 60 minutes when your clothes are wet. This will kill any ticks that remain on your clothing. Lastly, the most important thing you can do to prevent tick-borne diseases is to check yourself carefully for ticks after being outside in or near wooded areas. And for some people, this may mean making tick checks part of their daily routine. After coming indoors, you should remove all your clothing, closely check your entire body, and shower. Ticks may bite or hide in any part of your body, but tend to find hidden spots to attach to, such as the waistband area and the pelvis, the belly button, the backs of the knees, armpits, or scalp. Ticks, especially nymphs, can look like a fleck of dirt on your skin, so it's important to do a good job of checking closely. If you do find a tick, it's important to remove the tick as soon as possible. A video on proper tick removal is available on our website. Other good things you can do to prevent tick exposures at home include habitat management on your property. This would include keeping your trails mowed short and wide, removing leaf litter and brush around the house or on the property, creating tick-safe zones in areas where you spend time, such as a swing set or a picnic table, or placing these in dry areas of the yard. Create a barrier between your yard and the woods by creating a landscape barrier, such as a 3-foot wide border of wood chips or gravel. And pests can also be a good way to bring ticks into the house and may also be a good indicator of potential tick exposures for their owners. There is a Lyme vaccine available for dogs, but this will not stop your dog from bringing them into your house. Always check your pets for ticks, and it's best to do this before you come inside, and remove any you may find. If you're finding ticks on your pets after being in or near wooded or brushy areas, this is a good reminder to check yourself. Talk with your vet about tick preventatives and follow instructions of your vet and the product label. Protecting yourself from mosquito-borne diseases means bite prevention, and bite prevention is disease prevention. You can do this by creating physical barriers, such as wearing long sleeves and pants, staying indoors when disease-carrying mosquitoes are active, and assuring that your windows and screens are intact. Also, make sure to wear a repellent and always follow the label instructions. Use repellents that have 20 to 30% DEET, picaridin, or oil of lemon eucalyptus. Lastly, removing mosquito breeding habitat is important. You can do this by dumping water-holding containers weekly, such as kiddie pools, bird baths, buckets, fountains, flower pots, and covering your wood tightly with tarps so that the water cannot pool in those tarps, and checking and cleaning out your gutters. Another important prevention method is to remove any man-made containers such as tires from your property, and if you cannot remove them, moving them to a sunny, dry spot on your property that gets a lot of sun. Predicting the future of vector-borne disease risk in Minnesota in light of climate change is going to be challenging. Geographic distribution and incidence of these diseases is likely to change due to climate change. However, to what extent is still unclear. It is likely that the risk of illness will increase in some areas and decrease in others. The vector-borne disease staff at the Minnesota Department of Health are dedicated to maintaining long-term public health infrastructure that allows us to track vector-borne diseases over space and time here in Minnesota. Through ongoing disease surveillance, we interview cases to determine exposure locations and activities, in addition to systematic field studies that allow us to document expanding tick distribution and infection prevalence of ticks. We also partner with local, regional, and federal partners so we can stay up to date on vector-borne disease research. In the frame of climate change, the main concern is long-term changes that may affect vector-borne disease risk in the future, instead of temporary natural disasters or events that can affect vector-borne disease risk temporarily. Think, what will the climate in Minnesota look like in 200 years? How will this change the plants and animals found across the state? And how will this affect how humans use and develop the land? Will people move into or out of our state? And will immigration to Minnesota put pressure on the land and its resources? Will outdoor behaviors of humans stay the same or change based on these questions?
Thank you, Molly. To learn more about vector-borne diseases in Minnesota, the MDH Vector-Borne Disease Unit offers information and resources about diseases, prevention, statistics, news, and information for international travelers. To find out more about the Vector-Borne Disease Unit, you can visit the link shown at the bottom of this slide or search for vector-borne disease through the MDH agency website. In closing, I'd like to thank the following people who contributed their time and insights to create this training module: Molly Peterson, David Neitzel, and Jenna Bjork. They each brought perspectives and expertise to the table over the course of several months to shape what you saw today, and it's a great example of professionals working outside their traditional scope to advance public health. So many thanks to this group. And with that, I believe we have a few minutes to answer questions. To submit a question, hover over the top of your screen and select the chat box. You can then submit your questions there.